Welcome. My name's Will, and you may see a little cat running around. Her name's Tamby. This series is about getting a debut novel published, in this case my own. I'll show you the steps necessary to get a book on shelves while focusing on taking care of my mental health through an extremely vulnerable process. I'm going to get rejected, ignored, and have to face harsh criticism, some of it constructive, and some of it just like your opinion, man. So join me, and we can figure it out together. And if we don't, then this will be a guide of what not to do. It's win-win. I thought you might want to know something about me, or maybe you don't, but too bad. I was born in Paris to American parents, where some nuns forced me to be right-handed. I moved to New York City when I was 4. I'm walking here. While in high school, I started working in recording studios, and I headed to Los Angeles to attend USC for college. Go Trojans! Oops, not them, the other guys. They say never look a gift horse in the mouth. Here's an exception. After graduating, I worked in the film industry doing sound, both production and post-production. So how did I get into writing? When I was a little kid, my mom read The Hobbit to me, and I think that sparked an interest in fantasy. I've been an avid reader since, and always wanted to publish a novel, but never had quite the right story to tell. That all changed in 2019 when I got serious about writing a manuscript, and even more serious about seeing it finished. It took 5 years and a lot of work, but now we can focus on the good stuff. Getting published. With the traditional route, a physical book will make it onto store shelves. And maybe I'm old school, but I still like holding a book. It would be amazing to see a novel I wrote for sale, but hopefully not steeply discounted in a bin. On a shelf, please. Maybe even a nice one. Let's say eye level, even if that isn't alphabetically appropriate. The costs of editing, advertising, and artwork will all be covered by the publisher. These can get expensive, so that's a pretty good perk. I'll be part of a team and can rely on the expertise of others. Most of my life, I've tried to do things on my own, and I think there's a lot of merit to that. But it does come with its limitations, and it would be really nice to have the support and accountability of a team. That's kind of where you all come in too. Also, I won't need to do my own marketing or have to handle logistics like negotiating foreign rights or drafting contracts. What are some of the benefits of being independent? It's easier than ever to have a book available on digital platforms, and a small print run can be funded by a Kickstarter or pre-orders. I'll have full creative control over every single word in my novel, while a traditional publisher might be less inclined to take risks. I'll also have complete control over my marketing and promotion. If there's something I'm uncomfortable with doing, I don't have to do it. Finally, I'll get a much larger portion of any profit from a sale. I'll also know any success will be my own doing. Taking all that into consideration, why am I inclined to try traditional publishing? I figure I might as well attempt that, and if it doesn't work out, I can go independent. The opposite is not necessarily true. Many publishers will not publish something that's already available elsewhere. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not great with social media. It just doesn't come natural to me, and I think having a large foundation of an audience is a great way to go independent. Hiring an editor and paying for cover art is expensive, but those are also key things that separate you from the pack. If either of those are poorly done, I don't think your novel has much of a chance to reach any readers. The main reason, though, is I want to focus on writing, not running a business. I've been freelancing in sound for 20 years, and it's hard for me to motivate myself to network and find new clients. I recognize this deficiency about myself, and I think it's worth focusing on the strengths. What am I passionate about, and how can I do that to the best of my ability? Now that we have a direction, what are some of the first steps? Step 1. Finding a literary agent. I don't know how to do that, so I reached out to my social network to see if anyone knew any literary agents or any authors. One dearly supportive friend, Max, thank you, relayed that literary agents recommend this resource, Before and After the Book Deal by Courtney Mom. I'll be referencing this book endlessly, but here's some key takeaways from Courtney Mom prior to getting literary agent. You should read. Join a book group. Join or form a writer's group. Attend conferences like AWP to network. I missed the 2024 edition in Kansas City, but 2025 is right here in LA, and it's actually on my birthday. That seems like fate could be nudging me a little bit. That same friend Max also got me directly in touch with a published fantasy author. I then purchased and read his debut novel before drafting an email asking if we could get in touch. So what did that email look like? My eyeline is probably all wonky anyways, but I'm looking at a monitor over here, so it'll be even worse. You're welcome. What do you even title an email like this? I figured including my friend's name was a good way to stand out from random spam. So I went with Fantasy Publishing Query Connected via Max. I included his full name. I'm not going to do that here. It's kind of a dry title. It's not very sexy and exciting, but it gets the job done. Spoiler, it worked, so maybe I already had an N. Okay, dear doesn't seem appropriate here. So I just went with, hey, Brian, we want to be pals here. This is very casual. I would not open an email to a literary agent this way unless they had a very approachable tone. So we have a greeting. Now what? Thanks for letting Max share your contact info with me. He speaks highly of you. Tamby's over here to give some moral support. Oh, you want to come get involved, Tamby? So we've come up with a title for this email, which is admittedly a bit dry, but that's okay. We've casually greeted the person we're trying to reach. And then I thought it might be nice to connect who we both know to reiterate that fact and say something nice at the same time. I followed that up by mentioning that I have, in fact, read this author's debut novel. It felt appropriate to make a little bit of an investment. He's going to share some of his time with me, so I kind of owe it to him to show some initiative myself. I then got a little more specific about what I read because I think it's easy to read the back of a book or a summary. But no, I actually read the entire book. So I complimented him on the narrative structure. And also what I ended this paragraph with is also true. He likes to use very specific words that have a precise meaning and application, which is something I do truly enjoy. Now, I had to talk a bit about myself and why I'm even contacting this author. So I say, I recently finished a manuscript for a fantasy novel and was hoping to get some insight from you about the publishing process, finding an agent, indie versus major publishers, etc. I think that summarized my needs fairly succinctly. Plenty of ways I could have gone about that a little more efficiently, but you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself. I like this decision here. Rather than inundate you with questions, I thought it might make sense to ask you how you prefer to communicate. I think you want to make life as easy for the person who's essentially doing you a favor as possible. Is email the best medium, or is a phone call, Zoom, preferable? Now for the dreaded sign-off. I went with the simple thanks for your time. I think that's very appropriate here. Follow-up emails to this become a lot more tricky, but simple sign-off. I sent my email off into the world and had to wait. And graciously, Brian responded pretty quickly, so I didn't have to wait very long. So what now? How do I prepare for this call? I had been jotting down some questions since I came up with the idea of reaching out, even before I'd read his novel. What you see on this page is black is the question I asked, and green is a rough summary of how Brian answered. One of my first questions was, how helpful is having a publisher versus going the indie route? And Brian greatly reinforced my decision that I don't think the indie route is where I need to start. That can be where I end up, but it's not only a huge time investment that has nothing to do with writing, but also would be a financial investment. And I'm trying to at least break even, not spend money on releasing a book. When I asked Brian how to find an agent, he brought up a lot of things that are mentioned in this book. He really recommended doing my homework, finding a list of agents, what kind of authors they represent, what kind of books they prioritize, do my homework first, and then send out as many query letters as I can. Query? One key thing he specified is many literary agents will have a very specific formatting request. So if they do ask you to share some examples of your work, you need to adhere exactly to their guidelines or you may not even be considered. I asked him about the importance of social media for an author, and encouragingly, he said that wasn't the biggest thing. It certainly can work, and I think you can parlay that into a book deal in a lot of cases, but it's not a requirement. So, phew. What's the best platform for authors to reach an audience? Unclear. Like me, Brian doesn't seem to be aggressively using social media to make these connections, but there's things like Twitter, TikTok, Discord, YouTube, And a key takeaway from him was don't spend a huge amount of time doing that unless you're really into it. I want to be spending my time effectively on things that are making a difference. And then getting ahead of myself, the pressures of release dates for a trilogy. My book is planned as a trilogy, and I've only written one, which will probably be heavily edited. I noticed that the year after he released his debut novel, he released the sequel, and a year after that, he released the final book in the trilogy, which is extremely impressive. And when I asked him about that timeline, he said he was writing a book in about 9 months, which is pretty amazing. Was there any pressure from the publisher or editor to turn the story into something that wasn't part of your original vision? Surprisingly little, which is, again, encouraging. It makes sense if you think about it. If a large business is willing to take a risk on you financially, they probably like what you have to offer. They're not going to force you to be something you're not. They can just go find that elsewhere. What are some of the lessons you've learned from writing your debut novel that you would apply to future works? This answer kind of surprised me. He brought up naming conventions. What is this going to sound like in an audiobook? Are these names ridiculous? An example he provided of what not to do is Anomander Rake from this series by Steven Erikson. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Brian was then generous enough to encourage me to reach out and keep him updated on this progress. And I will. That's a key thing I learned from networking in the freelance world of film is you need to keep in touch with people. It can feel like you're pestering and bothering them, but it's appropriate to reach out now and again. And good for your career. I want to give Brian a special thanks for taking the time to even treat with me. And I also want to thank Max and Sonia for helping connect me to this author. So where does that leave us? I think we need to write a query letter. Query. So how do you do that? Find out next time.